Okay, so we're diving into, well, I guess you could call it a workplace trend. And this one's really got people talking. Gen Z ghosting.
Yeah, it's everywhere you look these days, right?
Exactly. So we're diving deep into an episode from Navigating the Workforce Minefield that you sent over. And I gotta say, it goes way beyond just those headlines, the ones that just write off this entire generation as like entitled or whatever.
Right, right. It's easy to just slap a label on it, but this episode really digs into like the actual anxieties a lot of Gen Zs are dealing with, and it's not just about wanting to be on TikTok all day.
Yeah. And they actually introduce us to this 23-year-old Jordan.
Who, spoiler alert, ends up ghosting their job, right?
Exactly, goes to their job. But, and this is key, they make it very clear, this isn't a story about, those lazy kids today. This is different.
Totally different. And they go into how trapped Jordan felt when their manager calls them out for, not meeting expectations. And you just get this sense of being totally overwhelmed. Like, where do we even begin to fix that kind of situation?
Oh, 100%. I've been there, that feeling of hitting a wall and just completely freezing up.
Totally.
But instead of, figuring how to climb over that wall, they just vanished.
Oof.
Gone.
And the episode really suggests this whole avoidance thing. It's becoming like a real coping mechanism, at least for some people in this generation.
It is, and what I thought was really interesting is how little the episode focuses on social media. It's almost a given at this point.
It's just the air they breathe, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like that's just the background noise of their lives. And the bigger issue, the bigger pressure seems to be more about this constant feeling of uncertainty about the future.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Climate change, a shaky economy, political divisions everywhere you look.
Exactly. I mean, these are things that previous generations, they didn't necessarily face in the same way.
It's like they're being told to prepare for this future that keeps changing right before their eyes.
Constantly shifting, yeah. And no wonder it's overwhelming.
Totally.
And here's another layer that the episode adds, which I thought was really insightful. They're not necessarily, how do I put this, equipped with the same coping strategies for workplace stress that maybe, previous generations had.
Yes, they haven't had to.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. They've grown up in this world of instant gratification, right? Online validation is everything.
So how do you go from curating the perfect Instagram feed to having a really difficult conversation with your boss?
Right. Those are very different skill sets.
Totally.
And on top of that, the episode brings up another factor, and this one really surprised me. The comfort zone of living at home.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. That safety net changes things, right?
Yeah.
If you're not worried about making rent every month.
Yeah, that's a different kind of pressure.
Exactly. So disappearing from a job that's stressing you out.
It might feel like less of a big deal, which isn't to say it's right, but it's a factor.
A factor, for sure.
Yeah. And it adds another layer of complexity to this whole thing. And what I appreciate is the episode doesn't just stay with Jordan's perspective. We also hear from Carol, who's the employer in this situation.
Yeah, and talk about a contrast, right?
Mm-hmm.
We go from Jordan to Carol, a baby boomer with years, decades of management experience under her belt.
Yeah.
They're coming from completely different worlds.
Completely. And you have to imagine, for someone like Carol, this whole ghosting thing.
It's unfathomable.
It would be baffling, right? Her generation was taught to face your problems head on,
Yeah.
Walking away, it just wasn't an option.
So we have this generational divide. And look, it's not about pointing fingers or saying one side's right and the other's wrong. It's about understanding where each generation's coming from and realizing that the workplace, it's not what it used to be.
It's a whole new ballgame. And this is where things get really interesting. Because the episode, it doesn't just lay out the problem, it actually offers some solutions, and they're good ones.
Okay, so tell me more about that. What are some of the things they suggest?
And the best part is these solutions, they're not about, fixing Gen Z or anything like that. It's more about understanding and empathy, which is so refreshing to hear.
I love that. So what are some of those bridges they're talking about? What can Gen Z do differently in these situations?
Well, they really emphasize the importance of building resilience and getting better at communication, So for Gen Z, it really starts with being willing to have those tough conversations with their boss, even when it's super uncomfortable.
Which, let's be real, that's way easier said than done.
Oh, totally.
Especially for someone like Jordan, who seems to just freeze up at the thought of any kind of confrontation.
Absolutely. But the episode makes a good point, which is that, sometimes those open conversations can actually prevent these like small issues from becoming huge, insurmountable problems. It's about nipping it in the bud, so to speak.
Address it before it becomes this huge thing that you just want to run away from.
Exactly.
And it seems like having someone to talk to like strategize with could be really helpful in those situations.
Totally, yeah. They talk about seeking out support, whether it's from, friends or mentors or even like therapists, which I thought was interesting.
It's true. There's no shame in asking for help.
No shame at all. And it actually shows, you're taking ownership. You're trying to figure this out in a healthy way.
It's like that saying, you don't have to be an expert at everything.
You just got to know where to find the answers.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's Gen Z. What about employers? What can they do differently?
So for employers, the episode really encourages a shift in, I guess you could say, mindset. It's not just enough to give feedback. Gen Z needs guidance. They need mentorship. They need to feel like they're actually being heard.
Which goes back to creating that workplace culture where, people feel safe to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't just be like a suggestion. It has to be modeled from the top down.
100%.
I mean, think about it. Who wouldn't want to work in a place where they feel like they can actually talk to their boss without being judged?
Right. That's a win-win for everybody. And you know what else really stood out to me is that they talk about the importance of recognizing what Gen Z brings to the table.
Oh, absolutely. Their skills, their perspective, it's totally unique.
Right, like their tech skills, their adaptability, how comfortable they are with the digital world, all of that. Those are huge assets in today's workplace.
For sure.
Instead of looking at those differences as obstacles, employers should see them as strengths. Like Gen Z has so much potential to bring fresh ideas, innovative solutions, but only if they're given the space to do that.
Only if they feel valued.
Exactly.
It's about recognizing that just because someone does things differently doesn't mean they're doing it wrong.
Exactly. And that each generation, they have something valuable to offer.
It really makes you think, like, what if we looked at these differences as strengths? Imagine how much more we could accomplish.
Right, imagine the potential.
Exactly. And this episode got me thinking, like, if a lot of this ghosting stuff comes from, this fear of having to actually talk about things when they go wrong.
Yeah, when it's not. Like a quick fix.
Right, exactly. What if we, like, totally rethought how we view failure in the workplace?
Oh, interesting.
Like, what if instead of disappearing, Gen Z felt like they could actually say, hey, I messed this up, but I'm down to figure it out.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I like where you're going with this.
Right. Instead of this whole, like, shame spiral.
Because that's what it is, right? It's like they don't have the tools to deal with that feeling, so they just...
Avoid, disappear.
Exactly.
But what if those quote-unquote failures were actually seen as, like, opportunities to learn and grow?
Now, that would be huge.
Yeah.
But it would require a real shift in mindset, not just for Gen Z, but, like, for everybody.
Oh, 100%. It's like that whole thing. What's it called? Psychological safety.
Yes. Creating that environment where people actually feel safe to, be vulnerable, take risks, ask for help when they need it.
Exactly. And that helps everyone, right?
Absolutely. More trust, more innovation. People actually feel like they can bring their whole selves to work.
Which is ultimately what we all want, right?
I think so.
Well, this has been amazing. It really seems like this whole Gen Z ghosting thing, it's like a lot more nuanced than those headlines make it seem,
It really is.
It's about these bigger changes that are happening, how the workplace is changing, this generation trying to find their place in a world that feels...
like a little crazy.
Yeah, a little crazy.
Totally get that.
Well, on that note, this has been an awesome deep dive.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's given everyone listening a new way to think about this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And, maybe some ideas for how we can all work together to make things a little better, a little more human.
I love that. A little more human.